And oh man, do I feel ashamed to be white right now. I am not joking there. Um, I, if you haven't read the title of this video, I just went and saw 12 Years a Slave. Yeah. This movie was a movie that uh, it was a movie that I didn't see the trailer in theaters, but was able to watch it online. Particularly, I watched it online because I didn't really believe that there was a movie coming out called 12 Years a Slave. But then I kept being reassured by everybody that it was, and that it also was getting a lot of Oscar buzz. I was like, really? There's a movie? I was like, really? There's a movie called 12 Years a Slave. That's like, wow. That does not sound like it's gonna be a fun movie whatsoever. And then I saw the trailers, and I was like, yeah, that looks really depressing, really, really heart wrenching. Just from the trailers, it was just awful. Like the stuff you see in it, and you're like, I don't know if I want to watch this. I mean, it was between this and Enough Said this week, and I, I was kind of juggling both, but because of how much unanimous praise this movie was getting, I figured, the hell, I gotta finally see this. I mean, it can't delay it any longer. I mean, I don't know how long it'll be at my movie theater, and apparently, from what I was told from one of the workers at the movie theater, this movie had been requested by a lot of people. A lot of people were wondering when this was coming to our theater, and it finally did. And yeah, so what do I think of this movie? It deserves all the praise it's getting. This is one of the best movies of the year, definitely, without a doubt. And this is definitely going to get some awards come Oscar time. If not in the Best Picture department, definitely in the acting department. There's particularly two really good performances that deserve Oscars, and if either one gets them, I would be happy with. Um, the first one that really is really really good in this freaking movie. First person that comes to mind that deserves an Oscar is the main guy who plays Solomon. I know that's not his name, but I have a hard time pronouncing it. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It's a really hard name to pronounce, but he's really 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 good, and you go for emotional roller coaster that he does throughout this movie, and you feel for this guy. You want to see him succeed, like set free, and it's heart wrenching, like what he goes through. He's does this performance very very freaking well. Um, it's a really hard. I've seen this guy in movies before, but I forget what I've seen him in. If anybody could tell me, I know I've seen him in stuff before, but it's been a long. He's a guy that looks familiar, but I can't place my finger on what I've seen him in. But he's really, really good in this. He's definitely. I've heard a lot of people say he's going to get an Oscar, and if he does, I have no issue. The other guy that's probably going to get an Oscar is Michael Fassbender. Jesus Christ, and he's that one who plays a despicable son of a bitch in this movie. He is. Oh wow, I don't know. Yeah, if he does not get some Oscar, at least some Oscar consideration, that's a fucking crime. He is really, really despicable in this movie, and he plays it very well. And this is a guy that uh, I have been a big fan of Michael Fassbender over the last couple of years, especially after I saw X-Men First Class. That was the first movie that I saw him like in, and I went, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Like literally, I was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And where the hell has he been? And after I saw that movie, I've been a fan of his ever since. And this movie probably will get him an Oscar finally. He's been nominated for an Oscar already, but he's definitely probably going to win one. Probably. I would probably venture to guess. I mean, there's a lot of great performances this year. Even though there's been a lot of shitty movies, there's been a lot of good performances out of some movies, and I think he will. I think he will be one of the top contenders, in my opinion. Everybody else is really, really good. There's a lot of performances that are really good in this movie. I can't really name one that was really bad. I'll just go through one side off the top of my head. Paul Giamatti pops up in this movie like very early on. He's the guy that um, sells Solomon and into slavery, and he's a prick in this movie. He does it very well. His performance is short, but it's very well done, and it's really really just Paul Giamatti being at his best. Honestly, there's very only one person in this whole movie, and that's Brad Pitt. Is is a is the only he's the only decent black white person in this movie. And Brad Pitt, what's just funny about Brad Pitt is that you see him a lot in the trailers, and for like an hour and a half of this movie, I was sitting there going, "Isn't Brad Pitt supposed to be in this movie?" I was just sitting there like, "Wait, did he get cut from this movie?" Even though he's in the trailers prominently, I was wondering, like, what the hell? When's Brad Pitt gonna pop up? He doesn't really pop up. It doesn't really pop up until the very end, where his main role is just to set up Solomon finally getting free, because that's kind of getting the spoilers. But let's face it, you kind of knew going in that this guy would end up being free somehow, because he wrote this book that this movie's based off of. So I mean, it's not a shock that he gets set free. Shouldn't be. But yeah, Brad Pitt's good in this. He has a good enough role, even how short it is. And I wish he basically he's this guy that's contracted by Michael Fassbender to help build a gazebo, I think. And and he basically doesn't share Michael Fassbender's views on slavery and is very against it, and wants to help Solomon be free and stuff like that. Um, Another performance that I really enjoyed, because I really honestly I enjoy this actor in almost anything, is Paul Dano. Paul Dano is really really fucking despicable in this movie. He has a short performance in this too, but he's very very despicable and very very good in the short time he's in it. Um, I definitely really enjoyed him in it. He's a good actor, anyways. He's always been a good actor. I'm trying to think of another performance. I would say definitely another person that maybe will get some Oscar consideration is the girl who Michael Fassbender has like lust over, the slave girl that Michael Fassbender lust over throughout the movie, and like rapes her and stuff like that. And I think she'll probably get some consideration. She was really good in this. I don't know her name, so it's kind of an unknown actress, so I wouldn't know who she is. I've never seen her in anything. This movie also, like I've said, is really hard to sit through. There are some. It does not shy away from the violence. Particularly the one scene that I remember being one of the hardest things to sit through was the whipping scene. That there's a scene where the girl that Michael Fassbender is raping and lusting over, where she goes to a rival or a different plantation to go get soap because she can't stand the smell of herself. And what the hell? Sorry about that. Um, and she can't stand the smell of herself, but Michael Fassbender won't believe her. And even though she has a bar of soap in her hand, he still doesn't believe her. And he then proceeds to whip her really brutally, and then has Solomon whip her also, even though he doesn't really want to. It's really really brutal. That scene is really brutal, and the effects in that are really brutal. It kind of reminded me, what that scene reminded me a little bit, like the effects in that scene reminded me of like Passion of the Christ and how brutal they were. Now the effects in Passion of the Christ were brutal, the blood and the gore. That whipping scene kind of reminded me of that. It was very brutal, but that's for a movie you kind of expect if you for a movie that's about slavery, you can't really shy away from it. Uh, you can't. I mean, I remember sitting there thinking, like, my God, you know, like all the stuff that this guy goes through. You're like, I know he gets to uh, uh, gets to be free by the end of it. But by God, like the stuff. There's points in this movie where he starts feeling hopelessness. You know, like there's very good, great moments of just quietness, like very good, great, quiet moments with him in the movie that express his hopelessness that he's feeling, and they're really, really good. And you start to feel hopelessness, even though you know the outcome. You still kind of do. I felt that's why I kind of felt like with Captain Phillips. You want to see that you know this guy's going to succeed, but you don't know how, and and you kind of just like are long for the ride, the emotional ride that this character's going through. This movie's rough. This movie's really, really rough. I do want to address one criticism I heard. I haven't read much reviews for this movie. I usually try to stay away from reviews before I see the movie, but I did catch a review. I forget who it was that actually one of the few critics that criticized this movie. There was only a couple bad reviews, and one reviewer did the typical asshole thing. That you see in these kinds of movies where like, oh, it didn't show enough violence in this movie. Really, fucking really. That he was trying to hint that it was just kind of sugarcoating the violence. Really, are you fucking kidding me? There's always one dickhead critic that always says that. I don't know how much more violent you want it to get. I mean, yeah, there's probably stuff that they could have added, but you know, you gotta have limitations in this. It's a freaking film, people. But then the other criticism I heard, and I kind of agree a little bit, but then I also disagree, is that the person was trying to point out that he didn't like that they told this story. That he said there's a lot of people that were in the same situation that Solomon was, that weren't as lucky as he was, and the fact that they didn't end up free, and they should have told their stories instead of his. And I kind of agree a little bit, but here's where I disagree. At the end of this movie, they tell you an epilogue of what happens to the guy, and they do address at the end of it that he was one of the few that people that were kidnapped and set free. He was one of the lucky ones. So they point that out, that he was one of the very few that got that lucky. But also at the same time, they tell you that the people that kidnapped him, because he basically gets what happens is if you don't know the story, is that he gets introduced to these two guys by his best friend, one of his best friends, who own a circus or whatever. And he's this really good musician and all this stuff. And the circus owners want him to perform on their circus as a musician, but these guys end up tricking him and selling him into slavery somehow. He basically gets drunk one night, wakes up, and he's in chains. It's really fucked up. It is. It's kind of really fucked up to see that kind of happen. But the sad fact is that at the end of this movie, they point out that he could not testify against these guys because it was a white. The courts were ruled by the whites. And because of that, they would not accept a black person to testify against white people. And that's really fucking disturbing. That's really sad to think about. And because of that, these guys were never prosecuted. There was nothing done to these guys. And that's really fucking sad. So in the end, justice wasn't really done for this guy. And then at the end, it tells you he also was you find out also that he was he wrote this book right after he got free in 1853, which I was kind of shocked. Is like I didn't know this book even existed until now, which is kind of crazy. It's been around for that many years, and how it's not part of classical literature. I mean, Uncle Tom's Cabin's considered classic literature, and I mean, why not this? But I don't know. But he, and then they show that he was like an activist for all, was an activist for abolitionist, or he was an abolitionist activist. That makes sense. And he helped the underground rail, helped the slaves in the underground railroad, and I thought that was really cool. But then they tell you at the very end that the date of his death, the location of his death, and the cause of his death is unknown, which is really weird. For a guy that made a book and all this stuff, you're like, how the hell is this guy's death records not out there? It's kind of really weird. I want to know, it's kind of sucks to hear. But I mean, this movie does have a happy ending though, and honestly, yeah, you could have gone the route of like telling a different person's story and have a more depressing ending, which is very true to what happened. All at the same time, there are a lot of characters that you meet throughout this movie that you never find out what happened to them, and honestly, you probably will never know what happens to them. They probably didn't get the same fate that he did, and that sucks. There are a lot of characters in this movie. I kept at the end of it, I was like, wonder what happened to that character, but you will never know. But it is really, by the end of this, I was wanting a happy ending. I didn't want a sad ending. Just after all the shit this guy went through, you want to see this guy have a happy ending, and he does, and I'm happy about that. But Jesus Christ, this was an emotional roller coaster, and I recommend this, highly, highly recommend this. Go see this. It's worth all the buzz. It's, I definitely think it'll be really. I do think it's gonna get some Oscars during Oscar time. Well, I'm gonna get off here now. I'm gonna maybe be back sometime this week with Enough Said. I'm gonna try to get around to watching that before it leaves my theater. I'm hearing good things about that. It's also James Gandolfini's last movie. But if some reason I don't, I'll be back next Friday with Hunger Games: Catching Fire, which I'm really looking forward to and hearing really good things about that too. So I'll be back with either one of those, and I'll talk to you later.